What's going on? Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. It has been a minute.
It's been so long.
It's been a minute. We planned very poorly last week because Tyler, you were out of town last week.
I was out of town.
I was also out of town last week.
You were out of town.
Cameron wasn't, but for him to do a solo podcast. Also, can I just say, like, he's moving to Florida in 48 hours, like less than 48 hours.
Less than 48 hours.
By the time you're listening to this podcast, like, he'll probably be hours away from moving to Florida.
Yeah,
that's kind of so last week was just a train wreck for us. We were not organized whatsoever. So we apologize for that, but we are back now. 2 podcasts a week until the start of the season. We'll still be having 2 podcasts. I don't know why I said until the start of the season. Oh, because then we'll have 3. Because then we'll have 2 during the week and it starts at Saturday. That's why I'm like, there's a reason I said that.
There's a reason.
Tyler, how you doing tonight, man? Just you and me hanging out.
Oh man, what an honor it is to be back to share the space. I'm not gonna lie, I missed having the fantasy football routine that I was in before I made my little rendezvous out to the suburbs of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Ooh. And oh no, sorry, that just
what you do?
I'm in a draft right now, and I was like, and Kareem Hunt's way down on the board, and I was like, oh, nice. And I've got a ways to go until I pick next. So I'm like, fine, I'll pick up Kareem Hunt. He just went.
Oh, sounds like someone pulled a me and reached down 15 picks to get Kareem Hunt.
Which is, we're not even live on YouTube, so There's no way they know. There's no way they know. Oh man. No, but real quick, I just want to give a special shout out to none other than the Cake Boys himself. Let's start off with the leaders, Cosmic Brownie, which is yours truly, Star Crunch, which is our good buddy, Martin _Ethan_11. I think that's the handle on our mailbag.
I know is that he's a frequent mailbag contributor.
Yep. Star Crunch, shout out to you, and then a special shout out to Twinkie, to Nutty Buddy, to Swiss Roll, to Zebra Cake, to Honey Buns, and to Oatmeal Pie. Shout out to all of you.
Did you all just attend a reunion for a funeral for like hostess treats or what?
Hey, whoa! We were we shared a common love for Little Debbie treats, and I know what you're all thinking. Twinkies and Swiss rolls are not Little Debbie treats. You know what? They're all cake treats. They're all cake treats, and you know what? That's why we call ourselves the Cake Boys, not the Little Debbie Boys. See, and it's Little Debbie Boys doesn't really have like the greatest ring to it. So
no, it doesn't.
So that's why we rolled out with the Cake Boys, because that's more inclusive, and that is, it includes in the Swiss rolls and the Twinkies and stuff. So again, shout out to the Cake Boys. Y'all are awesome.
Little Debbie Boys. I'm not going to be able to get over that now.
If we ever need to change the slogan of Three Stooges being dudes, we can just say the Little Debbie Boys.
The Little Debbie Boys. Oh, it's good to be back. I second that sentiment. It was good to have a little bit of time off, but also very much ready to be back in the daily fantasy football grind. Especially, man, now that training camp is underway, we missed a ton of news last week. I shouldn't say missed, but a ton of news happened last week. We won't recap all of it for you because by this point, a lot of it is over a week old. And if you haven't heard about it by now, it's because you're probably living under a rock. So we'll go over some pieces of news from just over the weekend here. Before we dive into our divisional breakdown, we'll be having back-to-back divisional breakdown episodes this week, the AFC West and the NFC West for both of this week's episodes. News and notes from this past weekend. Ty, we had our first taste of football on Thursday. Finally.
You guys did.
Well,
I wasn't nowhere near a TV, but you guys had a thrilling match with the Jaguars and the Raiders.
Man,
thrilling.
I don't care. It was football.
It was football.
It was football. It was football. From what you've seen, though, instant takeaways from the game. Like, I don't even want to draw any big fantasy conclusions because I don't think it's possible to. But just like instant reactions and takeaways you had.
Trayvon Walker.
Yeah.
Who that boy is.
Yeah.
Look, and I remember at the draft and all that stuff, we were saying like Aiden Hutchinson is a beast compared to Trayvon Walker. Right. Trayvon Walker is coming in with a point to prove, and that was a great start to the season for him.
Yeah, you never want to like pull too much out of the first game, but also like, I don't know, if you're a rookie and you show out like that, it's a good sign of things to come. I would like to think.
Yes.
Anything on the Raiders? There's a little bit of concern about how much Josh Jacobs was out there. Obviously, we saw some really good run from Zamir White too. Are you buying into any sort of narrative there?
No, well, I think I didn't think much of it at first, and then I saw an update. I don't know how many days ago it was, but like Josh McDaniels shut down a question about a potential trade with Josh Jacobs. So I really have no idea what to think anymore, because part of me is just like, well, it's preseason, you get the rookies out there, right? Like, but then for a reporter to ask a question about a trade that I don't think any of us knew about.
I don't think there was anything like it. It wouldn't have surprised me, but it wasn't one of those where I had heard like active rumors about Josh Jacobs being shopped.
Right. So I guess I'm not trying to overreact, but at the same time, like this, I guess it just further confirms what we, the fellows, have been saying for a very long time, that this is going to be like a 3-headed monster backfield with Zamir White, Kenyon Drake, and Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, I think we'll dive into more of that Raiders backfield in this episode, and I think you and I will have a little bit of time to go back and forth on some of those thoughts. But no, I agree. I'm not taking anything too much away from that game. It was fun to have football back. It's a Hall of Fame game. These teams still have a lot of time before the regular season, and Josh Jacobs is just a guy who typically likes to play his running backs in the preseason. Like, he likes to get them a lot of touches and a lot of reps right away. So that's why I think, we're all like, well, why is Jacobs out there? Like, does he have something to prove to the coaching staff still? I think it's just how Josh McDaniels likes to run his preseason games. Get their legs underneath them so they're ready to go for the regular season. So, other pieces of news: Kareem Hunt, this was big, requests a trade out of Cleveland. Slams his mic down.
Jeez, shoot!
I can't believe it. Request a trade out of Cleveland. He's still practicing in training camp, though. I don't think this does anything for his value in fantasy football. Here, let me rephrase. This does not hurt his value in fantasy football. It only helps his value in fantasy football.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, unless he goes to some team like Minnesota where there's Dalvin Cook.
Right.
Like, the only way it hurts him is he goes to a team that has a runner that is exactly like a Kareem Hunt.
Right. Yeah, if he goes to a similar situation that he's in Cleveland, right, where he's technically behind Nick Chubb, right?
Well, he's the 1B guy.
Right. I know behind doesn't feel right. I feel like a lot of people say, no, he's behind Nick Chubb. Okay, just go back and watch Kareem Hunt from 3 years ago, okay? Like, dude is insanely talented, right? You put Kareem Hunt on any other team, though, the dude becomes like a top 15 running back in fantasy. Does he not?
He does.
So that's why, like, I've been saying all off season, like, you're drafting Kareem Hunt too low right now. Like, as the running back 30, that is absolutely insane for a guy who has been top 12 when he's been on the field the past 2 seasons. Then you get him into a backfield by himself without Nick Chubb, where he gets majority of the rushing work and still gets a bulk of the receiving work. Like, that's a recipe for top 15, if not even higher, right? So I think this only helps Kareem Hunt's value. And if he continues playing for the Browns, guess what? You're still drafting him at a value right now. So if you can go out and get yourself some Kareem Hunt right now, go do it. Go get yourself some Kareem Hunt right now. I am very upset I don't have him on many of my dynasty teams anymore. I dealt him at the end of last year, unfortunately, but I digress. Matthew Stafford dealing with thrower's elbow, typically a baseball injury we see, not necessarily a football injury. And I can speak from experience, having been a baseball player and been around people who have had a lot of thrower's elbow in the past. Anyway, still taking reps at practice, but something to keep an eye on. How does this impact Rams rankings for you right now, as we're like in the prime season of like, holy crap, I have so many projections I need to tweak with all this news coming out, as we were discussing beforehand.
Yeah, right. All like 150 people that I've got to adjust.
Yeah, right.
At the moment, it doesn't affect it at all, because the tone that it all has when I read a report is, oh, he'll be fine week 1.
Yeah.
But as the closer that we get to week 1, and if it doesn't seem like it's getting better, then I'll start being concerned.
Right.
And and I think the thing is, like, let's remember who we're talking about here.
Yeah.
We're talking about Matthew Stafford, one of the most durable players in the league. But the amount of times that he throws the ball around, it's probably going to go down a little bit, because he's still going to play.
Yep.
He just won't be as involved. So when you look at the weapons then, and you're like, okay, Higbee and Allen Robinson, Van Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, I think it hurts the former 3. It doesn't really affect Cooper Kupp, because I think Stafford is going to be like, just hyper target.
Right.
So, like I said, for the moment, it's fine. It's fine. But as we get closer and closer, and if it doesn't sound like it's getting better, then I will start to worry a lot more.
Yeah, I agree. If it's something we're still hearing about 2 weeks from now, then I'll be concerned. As of right now, I'm not too worried about it. It's pain management. And frankly, Matthew Stafford is the kind of guy who will just say, just put something in me, numb it up, and I'll be fine. Right. Like that's just the guy Matthew Stafford is. So no, I'm with you there. Last piece of news. We're just trying to mow through all the BS, right? There's a ton of reports coming out right now, different guys taking different reps, and I like depth chart news. And it's just like, that's just all smoke, man. But last piece of like actually fantasy relevant news, J.K. Dobbins activated off of the PUP list and on track to be ready for week 1 against the Jets. Gus Edwards, on the other hand, not looking like he'll be ready to suit up week 1. What are you making of all this now?
I hate ranking Cleveland players, but a close second is Baltimore.
Oh, close second is totally Baltimore.
I guess. Gosh, shoot. You thought both Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins weren't going to make it for week 1.
Right.
So you're like, oh, Mike Davis, bump him up a little bit. And
Tyler Beatty even.
And then the reports are coming out, oh, Gus Edwards should be good to go for week 1, and Dobbins should not be ready to go. And then you're like, okay, down Mike Davis, down Tyler Beatty, and up Gus Edwards. And then Dobbins is good to go. Now Edwards is done, and now you're like, okay, so now we have the lead back in the scenario in the team back. That's got to impact more than just Mike Davis and Tyler Beatty. Like that impacts Lamar a little bit.
Yeah, that
impacts Bateman. That even Andrews a little bit.
Andrews a little bit. Yeah.
Having Edwards out and Dobbins in, it affects a lot more people than I think we want to admit.
No, it totally does. I 100% agree. I'm glad I didn't tweak any of my Dobbins projections.
Yeah, you're lucky.
Because I'm just not tweaking anything until I know anything for certain. So like Alvin Kamara, like I need to start tweaking him now because his court date is getting pushed back. And honestly,
oh no,
like, yeah, like he might be one where it's like, okay, shoot, I might need to project him a full 17 games now versus, I'm assuming a 4-game suspension, but right. Like all of a sudden, like J.K. Dobbins, great. All of a sudden I have him on track for pretty much what I already projected him out to be. Cause this is exactly the scenario I imagined J.K. Dobbins in, was coming into week 1 healthy ish and still getting eased back into that offense. So no, I'm back in on J.K. Dobbins. I'm willing to draft him in mostly in best ball leagues right now. Redraft we'll see come closer to time, but like in best ball, his ADP was falling like day by day by day. If you're in best ball leagues now, go ahead and get yourself some J.K. Dobbins. I think that's totally fine.
I'm I'm about ready to say, like, you know what? When we do our draft guide next year, we're not doing this like most up-to-date thing. When we release it, and we're not doing suspensions, we're not doing la-da-da. It is full 17 games for every player. Screw the potential injuries, how many games they'll miss. No, I'm doing full 17. I'm keeping it until I know, instead of being like, oh, actually, I think this will happen. No, there's no more less thinking, more doing. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the motto for our draft guide next year.
Less thinking, more Dewey. Therefore, more Dewey would mean updating your projections more frequently, would it not?
No, unless I tell myself, no, we're just keeping it, which I will do.
If you don't have our draft guide, by the way, $5. You can go check that out in our link tree. Venmo, Cash App, PayPal is $5 in your email, and we will get that sent over to you. Projections on over 200 players from all three of us. So it's like
most up to date.
And the most up to date, yes. Yeah, you're getting that update every single day. So you don't have to pay for a new draft guide. Come closer to your draft day.
Right, exactly.
All right, let's move on to the AFC West divisional breakdown. And as always, it's been a minute. It's been a minute since we've had another hot take tie. Drop a hot take for us. So, Ty, we're talking about the AFC West. We got the Broncos, we got the Chiefs, we got the Raiders, we got the Chargers. Who are we focusing on today?
We're focusing on the guy that I'm surprised we haven't been labeled as the anti this player people yet, because every time we mention his name,
it's not a lot of positive, honestly.
I was gonna say, like, it is not very optimistic. And if you know us, you know exactly who we're talking about. But for those that don't, I'm talking about Derek Carr. Okay, the trendy guy that will sneak into the top 12 this year for quarterbacks because he's got Devontae Adams and a new coach. Guys, we're talking about the guy that has never really, I mean, besides his like one MVP year, right? But he got injured that year, has never been like the highest like touchdown thrower in the league. He had the yardage last year, but he didn't have the touchdowns. And I think we're all expecting the same thing this year. He's now in a run-first offense with McDaniels that likes to run the ball in. And let me repeat it. Even when Tom Brady was in New England, McDaniels still liked to run the ball in. Okay? Yep. Here's the hot take. Derek Carr is going to finish outside of the top 15 quarterbacks this year.
In fantasy football. I like it. I like that.
Again, we know plenty of people that like to make the efficiency arguments. Guess what? Fantasy football does not care about your efficiency stats.
What's crazy is that the other thing too, like you even look at like Hunter Renfro's targets from last year. We'll dive into this more deeply when we talk about the Raiders, but like Derek Carr has never been a guy, like he'll hyper target guys, but like even Hunter Renfrow last year, only 128 targets as the only guy when Darren Waller missed time throughout the season. Like now you get Dave McDaniels in there, and it's like I don't think like all of a sudden this offense has three guys who see north of 120 targets. You know what I mean? Like I just don't think that's in the cards for Derek Carr. So no, I really like that hot take. I am on board with that hot take. Let's dive into the division here. We won't start with the Raiders. They will be later in the bunch here. But let's start with the Denver Broncos. Broncos country. Let's ride.
Oh gosh. Oh my no.
I almost clipped the soundbite, but then I'm wondering if we would have gotten in trouble for that. But I figured we couldn't because I don't think Russ has trademarked it yet. But at any rate, Broncos country. Let's ride.
Pain. That's all I feel is pain.
We'll start with the man who spoke that quote into existence, Russell Wilson. New quarterback of the Denver Broncos, blockbuster move this offseason to go and acquire him. Tyler, you have him as a quarterback 9. I have him as the quarterback 8. We both have him locked in as a top 10 option this year. Your confidence level in that is
borderline like 80% sure. Like
80.
I'll say 75.
75.
Yeah.
I'm at like a 95.
I only say 75, 80 because we can just name off all the quarterbacks, but that takes too long.
That's fair. Russell Wilson, name game.
Oh no. No, I like part of me does wonder a little bit though, right? With Hackett as the there's the coach now and the scheme that kind of coming from Green Bay. That scheme is a Shanahan scheme.
Yeah, that's fair.
And Shanahan in a Shanahan scheme is built off the run. So like part of me like realizes the talent that Russell Wilson is, but this is a very different team than when he was in Seattle, right? Like Pete Carroll also liked the run, but like these teams use the run very differently. So like, again, I don't deny the talent that Russell Wilson has, and I don't deny the weapons that he has either. Part of me is just like, wonder like just how many touchdowns the run game kind of takes away from Russell Wilson this year.
That's fair. I feel like the run game, this team is going to score a lot more points this year. Let's first set the record straight there. I just think when you come from a system like Seattle where Pete Carroll is just old fashioned, let me run the ball on first and second down and have Russell Wilson chuck the ball downfield, right? Like when you come from an offense that's already so laser focused on establishing the run, and now you come to a Hackett offense, which, like you said, is a few branches down the Shanahan tree at this point. Like I'm not as worried about that, I guess, because we've seen Russell Wilson finish above quarterback 11 in every single season of his career when playing the full season, of course. So when he comes into this offense now, like I'm just not as concerned. And I still like the weapons he has at his disposal. Like we've seen Aaron Rodgers still put up top 5 finishes. And I'm not saying Russell Wilson is Aaron Rodgers. Don't hear what I'm not saying. But we've still seen Aaron Rodgers have elite fantasy performances in this Matt LaFleur, Nathaniel Hackett offense. So I'm just not as worried. I'm just at like a 95. Like I have him at 8. I feel great about it. I'm drafting him in a ton of drafts because he's sitting right around that 10, that 8, that 9, 10, 11 range in every single draft. And I'm taking him there every single time, especially if I have another wide receiver on the Denver Broncos we'll talk about shortly. But I don't know. I guess I'm just not as concerned.
Which is fair. And I think to give my percentage some perspective as well.
Yeah.
Like I could say the same percentage for like Mahomes finishing as a top 5 quarterback this year.
Oh, interesting. Okay. We'll talk about him.
We will actually. But like that like 80, that like 75 to 80 is like my like 90% for you, I guess.
Sure.
I just give more credit to the other, possibilities than I should, but if I hit 90, I'm almost at like 100 then.
Math.
Big brains.
Big brain maths. Energy right there.
Yeah.
Big math. No, that makes sense. But I mean, clearly both have him as a top 10 option. You could probably slot a few guys in there ahead of him potentially, but like if we get fully healthy Russ back, like I think big things are in store in Denver for him this year. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about his pass catchers as we just talked about. The big debate in the fantasy football community right now is Courtland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy. And frankly, based on our rankings, it's not as close as people are making it out to be. We both prefer, I should say all 3 of us, because I know Cameron does as well. all three of us, we prefer Cortland Sutton to Jerry Jeudy here. What's your primary reason for that? Because you have Sutton at wide receiver 17 and Jerry Jeudy at wide receiver 33. I have Sutton at 13, which is honestly, I think, fairly high, and Jeudy at wide receiver 26. So why is there, I mean, for both of us, it's about well, I guess your gap is 16 and my gap is 13. So why is there this massive gap between the two here when we've seen DK and Tyler Lockett finish back to back?
That's a very good point. I've
asked myself that a lot. It makes me question both my Sutton and Jeudy ranking if I'm putting too much stock into one or the other.
Yeah, I just think Sutton is going to get, I mean, you can look at data and just look at how Russell Wilson likes the bigger wide receivers.
Yeah.
Because he likes to just chuck the ball downfield. That's it. I mean, and like don't get me wrong, like both Metcalf and Lockett were downfield guys, right?
Yep.
In their own respect. Sutton and Jeudy can also be like that. But you kind of need a complement to a downfield guy. And I think Jeudy is much more of a compliment than Lockett was. And again, we've said this before. You can go look up at all the heat maps and the route trees and all that stuff. It does favor Sutton, but like they will find a way to utilize Jeudy because Jeudy was a top 12, top 15 pick in let's see, 3 years ago. Like
3 years ago would be now in the 2020 draft.
We're like Jerry Jeudy has talent, and he is very, very good.
He's very good.
Like I think in some ways we can be high on Sutton, but like we could also be much more higher on Jeudy because I think what we're trying to say is that like everyone's kind of in this like low end wide receiver to high end flex territory for Sutton and Jeudy.
Yep.
We're willing to put Sutton closer to like 15, but we could also put Jeudy kind of closer to that high end flex spot as well.
Oh, 100%. Like I keep going back and forth, and like I feel like I have so many good things to say about Sutton and just not as many for Jeudy. Yet at the end of the day, if you ask me, like, does Jerry Jeudy have top 15 upside? I would tell you yes. Like that's not out of the range of outcomes, I don't think. Do I think it'll happen? No. I think, top 20 is probably more likely. Top 25 is certainly, I think, and I'm like, what did I say? I have him at 26, 24, 26. So like 25, top 25, I think is extremely likely. Top 20, maybe a little less likely, but like both of these guys have immense upside this year. Like I've given you kind of referenced my argument for Sutton, right? You talk about the type of routes and targets that Russell Wilson peppers his wide receivers with. You overlay a Cortland Sutton route tree and a Russell Wilson heat map a target heat map. Cortland Sutton is on about 85% of those routes that Russell Wilson is targeting more favorably than the across the middle routes that we see Jerry Jeudy typically run. I think we could see Jerry Jeudy get more involved on the outside this year, especially with Tim Patrick now out for the season with an ACL tear. I just prefer Sutton. He's the bigger body. I think he's going to catch more touchdowns than Jerry Jeudy. To my eye, people might disagree with this. He's the more proven wide receiver out of the two.
Oh, no one will like that.
Nobody will like that.
Just the fact. That's just
one has an almost 1,100 yard season on his resume. I believe Sutton was at like 1090 his sophomore year in the league. Jeudy hasn't hit that mark yet. And you can say like, quarterback play has sucked. Well, it has for Sutton too. The other argument I hear a lot is, well, look at how many targets Cortland Sutton saw when he and Jerry Jeudy were on the field at the same time. You don't know who his quarterback was? Teddy Bridgewater, who can't throw the ball downfield to save his life.
You know who his offensive
deep ball
coordinator
accuracy
was?
in the league. Say that again.
You know who his offensive coordinator was?
Who's his offensive coordinator?
Well, Pat Shurmur.
Yeah, Pat Shurmur does not like the deep ball. That does not favor a player like Cortland Sutton.
No.
Imagine Pat Shurmur on the Minnesota Vikings still with Justin Jefferson. I'd be in shambles.
Jefferson would want to trade after like his first year.
Anyways, I digress. Former offensive coordinator Pat Shurmur for the Minnesota Vikings. Everything in that offense favors Sutton more. Like, we need to throw out all this old Denver Broncos crap because this is a new regime. There's a new quarterback, an actually talented quarterback, might I add, right? Like, we're not playing with the ghost of Joe Flacco and like permanent backup Case Keenum, right? Like, we're done with those guys now. We have an elite superstar quarterback who's ready to pepper these guys with quality targets. Also, can I say, like, Cortland Sutton like exploded at the start of last season with Drew Lock, who is a much better downfield thrower than Teddy Bridgewater. Can I just say that? Like, can I put that on the record and like tell people just go look at Fantasy Pros?
You may want to just say it a little louder for the people in the back.
I laugh how many Googleable facts people dispute.
Facts.
Facts. It's not like I'm not out here just like giving you my thoughts or like assumptions of like, oh, I think this happened. Go Google it. It's a Google search away. At any rate, I digress. So we both agree. We would rather have Cortland Sutton, but the gap in our projections is definitely closer than it appears. Objects in mirror may seem closer than they appear. I feel like that's the perfect summation of our thoughts on Sutton and Judy.
Yes.
So you're driving, you're on the Sutton train, but Judy's pulling up quick on the motorcycle in the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
So no, we like both of them this year. But let's talk about the other headache duo on this team. Not wide receivers, the two running backs, Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon. Holy crap, I didn't realize I was so low on Melvin Gordon, but I guess I am. Javonte Williams, it feels like he is the clear favorite to lead this backfield this year. There's been a ton of hype of trying to push Javonte Williams into that top 12, top 10 range of running backs. He's very frequently being drafted right around, running back 10 to 12. I can't get on that train yet. I just can't. Not quite there. I have him as my running back 16 currently. You're close, Tyler. You have him as your running back 13. What's your split? Let me say this. What's your split on Javonte and Melvin Gordon this year? Like, how do you have them splitting carries? Because in training camp, we have heard every bit of pieces of news possible of it's 70-30 Javonte. It's 55-45 Javonte. Melvin Gordon's getting more work in the receiving game. Oh, but now they're on a pitch count, right? Like, we have heard literally everything possible from this offense and the running back. So how do you have them statted out currently in terms of their split carries?
I got it anywhere between like the 60-40 split and a 65-35 split.
Sure.
Like,
yep.
Like it's enough to give an edge to Javonte, but it is just enough of Melvin Gordon to just tick off anyone that has Javonte Williams.
100%. I'm at a 65-35 split right now. And I think that's as generous as I'm going to get. Because I personally, I like Melvin Gordon was pretty good last year.
Mm-hmm.
Melvin Gordon was pretty good last year. Oh my goodness. And I'm getting a call right now. That's awkward from a person that I have not talked to in ages. At any rate, I digress. Was not expecting that. We're all over the place. No, I have it 65-35 right now. And I think that's as generous as I'm going to get. Mostly because I don't think the Broncos want to just give Javonte the full workload right now. Like, is he capable of receiving it? Absolutely. But I don't see why you bring Melvin Gordon back to give Javonte Williams 75% of the carries. I don't see that. And I know Javonte's dominating the first team reps. I know he's seen, 80% of the carries with the first teams in the first couple of days of training camp, but I don't know what world it is where Javonte Williams sees even north of 70% of the carries this year, let alone 70% of the carries this year. So I might honestly have him maxed out at his carries in my rankings right now. And that puts him at running back 16.
I think the biggest difference is who's going to get the touchdowns this year. Because Melvin Gordon was really relevant because of his touchdowns last year.
Right. He had 8 and Javonte had 4.
Javonte finished higher, though, because of his receiving.
Correct.
So it's really, I guess, when it comes down to how we think these guys will finish this year, it's really going to come down to the rushing touchdowns.
Sure.
And I think with a Shanahan offense, I mean, that favors Javonte, does it not?
No, it does. I have Javonte for 7 touchdowns and Melvin Gordon for 5.
That's the thing, though. And it's, I guess, the point I made earlier. Melvin Gordon will take just enough to keep Javonte Williams on that fringe. And you're like,
100%.
This week will be the week where Javonte really takes over. It won't happen because Melvin Gordon will score a rushing touchdown or something like that, right? Like it'll happen every single week.
Yeah. If Javonte Williams has 1 more touchdown, if he has 8 touchdowns, he jumps up to my wide receiver 13. Like that is how close I have packed my wide receiver 12 to my wide receiver 8 to my wide receiver running back, excuse me. That's how close I have my running back 12 to like my running back 17. They're all within like 6-7 fantasy points of each other. So like my ranking is not to say like I am out on Javonte Williams. I'm not in on drafting him as a running back 10. If he falls to the running back 14 range though, and you start, throwing guys like, I'm trying to think who else I have in that range, like even Ezekiel Elliott or Javonte Williams, like I start to think about it a little bit more. James Conner, Javonte Williams, I start to think about that one a little bit more, right? Like Javonte's upside is just enough that I am willing to stop and say, oh boy, actually, what if? Like, what if he just explodes this year? Which, and I don't know if some of those other guys will explode to the tier that Javonte could this year.
I apologize for the noise.
Modog causing issues.
We were pleasantly talking about football, and then all of a sudden the vacuum starts going, and then we're yelling at the guard dog. I apologize. Anyway, I feel like this emphasizes really the reason why we don't go 0 RB, and that we go actually 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds of our drafts.
Yeah.
Because if you can grab let's say a Najee Harris, and then you get Aaron Jones in the 2nd round, you don't have to mess with running backs after that for at least a couple rounds.
Right.
Versus if you wait and you take 2 wide receivers, then you're kind of stuck in this like James Conner and fill in the blank of any other running back debate that you get yourself into. I think that the point that you're making of just like these running backs are anywhere between like 13, 17, 18. That's where the headache starts for running backs. And I want to do everything that I can to avoid that.
Yes, 100%. I don't want to walk out of my draft and say, you know what, honestly, maybe I should have just taken Aaron Jones in the 2nd instead of getting CeeDee Lamb, who admittedly is a little bit of a question mark, right? Like we have all the confidence in the world in him, but like it's no guarantee he finishes top 7 where he's being drafted right now. Maybe I should have taken an Aaron Jones there, and then in the 4th, I should have taken a Michael Pittman, a Mike Williams instead of, okay, well now all of a sudden I have Josh Jacobs as my running back 2. Breece Hall as I love Breece Hall, but right, like you start playing these games then of like, maybe I should have gone a different route, right?
Yep.
So I agree with that sentiment entirely. As I see, we've spent a ton of time on the Broncos here.
I was just going to say, the Broncos probably needed the most diving into because it is such a
dead
question mark.
These
3 teams will just breeze by.
Yes, these next 3 teams will breeze by. One more thought, though, one more player. Albert Okwuegbunam. Any interest in him this year?
You just wanted to say his last
name.
No,
I mean, he's getting hype in the community. I love saying Albert Okwuegbunam, but I mean, I say his full name on purpose.
I think had we talked about this like 2 weeks before, I don't think we would have said anything about it. But now that Tim Patrick's out, there is some, there's a pull to Albert O this year. But I'm give me away from the tight ends. I mean, Can we name one tight end that Russell Wilson actually threw the ball to?
Will Dissly. He had some relevance.
Yeah,
but it was again, it was very Will Dissly had 4 straight weeks of a touchdown, and then he just kind of faded to nothingness.
I was gonna say, if anything, he had streaming appeal, not roster appeal. And I feel like that's where I'm at with Alberto.
Yep, exactly. Let's move on to the Kansas City Chiefs. And like you said, these are really going to breeze by because it's a lot of elite players. And frankly, I think we're all kind of on the same page here. Let's start with superstar quarterback Patrick Mahomes, who, my goodness, people, we need to quit drafting Patrick Mahomes as a top 3 quarterback. I am fully ready to say that. We need to stop drafting him as a top 3 quarterback. Patrick Mahomes hasn't finished as a top 3 quarterback the past 3 seasons. He also hasn't finished in the top 3 quarterbacks in fantasy points per game the past 3 seasons. You're trying to tell me that I now need to spend a 3rd round pick on Patrick Mahomes as the 2nd quarterback off the board after he lost his superstar wide receiver this offseason, and no hate on Juju Smith-Schuster. I love Juju Smith-Schuster this season, but he ain't no Tyreek Hill. Sky Moore is no Tyreek Hill. Marquez Valdes-Scantling sure ain't no Tyreek Hill. Why are we still doing this? His ADP is too high. You have him at quarterback 5. I have him at quarterback 6. He should not be going in the 2nd round. The earliest he should be going is the 5th round. Change my mind.
I mean, let's give some credit to Patrick Mahomes.
He's a great talent.
He's a great talent.
Best quarterback in the NFL. You can ask me that any day of the week. He is the best quarterback in the NFL.
And he's a solid fantasy option.
Yes.
But we're just out on the price tag. And look, we're not denying the upside that he has because he is Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
But he is a far riskier pick than people think.
Oh, in the 3rd round. That's what it is. He's far less risky if you draft him in the 5th round. Mm-hmm. If you draft him in the 3rd, all the guys you're missing out on in the 3rd round. Michael Pittman, DJ Moore, AJ Brown, Ezekiel Elliott, James Conner, Javonte Williams, Saquon Barkley is borderline 3rd.
Borderline 3rd, yeah.
But I listed half a round of guys. I mean, we could keep going after that even, right? T. Higgins going in the 3rd round. Keenan Allen in the 3rd round. Mike Williams. I probably wouldn't take him 3rd round because his ADP is so insanely low. But right, these are guys that you could be taking instead of Patrick Mahomes, who is not going to finish as the quarterback 2 this year. I will put money on it. I would, if Prize Picks, promo code fellas, had a fantasy prop on it. That was totally a random plug. I did not actually script that out or plan for that whatsoever.
We love it. Shameless plug.
He's not going to finish there, people. He's just not going to. So stop spending a 3rd round pick on him as the 2nd overall quarterback. Just stop it, please. I love Patrick Mahomes. I do. He's the best quarterback in the NFL. Not a top 3 quarterback for fantasy football this year. I got what I needed to off my chest. Let's move on to a guy who is worthy of a 1st or 2nd round. Well, 2nd round pick for sure. Travis Kelce. Look, he's 1 or 2. Okay. I have him firmly at 1, mostly because of Tyreek Hill leaving and the nature of the Kansas City offense and what they're going to need to do to stay in games this year. You have him at tight end 2. Is there any specific reason for that outside of I know you really like Mark Andrews, but is there anything that keeps Is there anything that keeps Travis Kelce from jumping Mark Andrews in your eyes this year, or staying ahead of Mark Andrews, I should say?
It's honestly a coin flip on it. That's honestly what it is. And I think the reason why I got Kelce too is I'm just worried that defenses are going to kind of take away the middle of the field. They're going to force Mahomes to go outside, where Travis Kelce is more times than not there. So,
right.
Maybe Andy Reid is getting Kelce out on the sidelines a little bit more, knowing that's what defenses are going to try to take away. But again, it's a coin flip. They're both the number 1 option in their offense. So it's just a pick your flavor and just be happy.
I'm totally fine drafting Travis Kelce in the 2nd round. That's what I'll say.
I'm fine drafting both of. Drafting both Andrews and Kelce in the 2nd round.
Yeah, year. I think. Mark Andrews is going tail into the 2nd round. Kelce's more early second round. So either way, I think you can draft both of them second round and get perfectly fine value. I have no gripes with where either of them are going because, well, Travis Kelce, the one who we're actually talking about, I have him as my tight end one. He is the definition of positional advantage in fantasy football. Let's move on to this backfield, though. This backfield is... give me one word to describe this backfield.
Okay. Oh, hate it. That's two.
2 words.
I'll put in a hyphen for one. I hate it.
Hate it.
Hate it.
You can hyphenate
Hate
anything
it.
and just make it one word. My word, I think, is disgusting. Like, I don't want to touch this backfield with a 10-foot pole. Even though I have Clyde inside of my top 30 running backs. Here, let's ask the same question that I did with Russell Wilson. What's your level of confidence in having Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a top 30 running back this year?
Oh boy. Like 55, 60?
I think I'm below 50, man. I think I'm at like a 40%. Like every day I hear more and more news out of Kansas City. And the more and more I'm like, I really don't think I want Clyde Edwards-Helaire this high in my rankings.
No, if anything, I think this backfield is going to be a committee. They're just going to use a hot hand.
Yeah. I think it is because every move they made this offseason indicates they don't want to give Clyde a full workload, even a 75% workload. You bring in Ronald Jones, who's much more of a downhill running back than Clyde is. You bring back Jerick McKinnon, who pass catching extraordinaire. You draft Isaiah Pacheco, who is lighting up camp right now. Got some work with the ones, right? Like, I don't know how much confidence the Chiefs actually have in Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So I don't have any statistical evidence for you. You can just go back and look at how frustrating Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been the past 2 seasons. I just don't think Andy Reid, I don't think just wants to commit to him anymore like he was willing to do at one point.
He doesn't. I mean, Jerick McKinnon wasn't supposed to be back with the team, and then all of a sudden he is.
Right.
Like this team will just go with a hot hand. And shoot, I think if you draft CEH, you better be happy if he's a hot hand in in half of the games this year.
Yeah.
That's really going to be his ceiling, is half of the amount of games this year.
I don't see myself drafting much Clyde Edwards-Helaire at all this year. He's someone that I'm pretty much willing to stay away from at all costs. Last pass catcher, I think that's worth spending some time talking about. Juju Smith-Schuster, newly acquired weapon for the Kansas City Chiefs, signed a 1-year deal loaded with incentives, right? It's a very incentive-heavy contract to get his payday, which I think people are trying to use as a knock on why Juju won't be good. I'm like, to me, if your contract is loaded on incentives, would you not want to perform to meet those? And
it's motivation.
Oh, you know what? I got the whatever guaranteed money I got. I'm willing. Like, if it's an incentive-based contract, with the incentive is there to incentivize you to hit those marks. I think it's just a silly argument.
Mm-hmm.
At any rate, I have him as my wide receiver 29. You have him as your wide receiver 26. So we're big Juju Smith-Schuster believers. He's currently being drafted outside of the top 30 wide receivers.
That's a steal.
I think it is too.
I mean, is there a possibility he finishes top 25 this year?
Oh, 100%. 100%, yes. Like, when you're attached to Patrick Mahomes, like, most commonly, wide receivers perform better when they switch teams or when a quarterback switches to their team. That is a astronomical improvement from the situation that they're in, right? We've been saying this. Switching from mediocrity to acceptable doesn't do a lot for your fantasy value. But when you go from acceptable to superstar, okay, that does something. It happened for Cooper Kupp. It could happen for Juju this year, right? We're looking at Allen Robinson as another guy like that who switched teams, but you had Justin Fields, Mitch Trubisky, the Red Rifle, Andy Dalton throwing you the football. Now you go to Matt Stafford. Okay, I'm a little bit more intrigued now. You go from noodle arm, probably should have retired 2 years ago, Big Ben, to Patrick Mahomes hitting the prime of his career. Already has a Super Bowl win under his belt, right? Like, Juju could be in for a big year. He could be in for a big year.
Dare we say league winner?
I think he has league winning upside. I think he does. I'm willing to say that.
Well, we'll say it, but I'm not trying to let our league mate in on it because he has him and he won't trade him unless we drop the value on him. So Juju is just overrated, honestly.
Bro, he sucks.
And he is just trash. So yeah.
He's a league winner though. Just to rattle off a few other names. If you got to choose one to pick in the later round of your drafts, that's not named Juju Smith-Schuster. Sky Moore, MVS, or Mecole Hardman. If you got to choose
MVS.
I think I'm leaning Sky Moore, but MVS. If I don't get Sky Moore, I'm not gonna cry about it because I could get MVS. Like, I like both of them as late round players.
If there's anyone I'm not I'm willing to admit if I'm wrong on this. I don't buy in on the Sky Moore stuff at all.
Really?
I really don't, because I just don't. We're seeing this Isaiah Pacheco. Jerick McKinnon also kind of did that last year. Like, there's a lot of talk about the weapons in Kansas City. And now we've got Sky Moore in the backfield and in the slot and stuff. That's the role that Mecole Hardman had last year. And I'm not saying that Mecole Hardman is going to go right back to that role. But, like, is this just... I feel like this is more of just, like, introducing Sky Moore to the Mecole Hardman role, because they're not going to bring back Hardman next year. And then when that happens, that's when Sky Moore takes over. It's not going to be this year. But I can understand taking a flyer. Personally, for me, I cannot convince myself to do it.
It's interesting you say that, because then the follow-up question to that is, when has Mecole Hardman been fantasy relevant? Which is, I think, what you need to ask yourself when you make that argument. And the answer is
never.
Very seldom. So yeah, no, I mean, so when you phrase it like that, your argument makes a lot more sense, which I could buy in on that a little bit more and say, you know what, maybe I am more willing to take a shot on MVS than I am Sky Moore.
And look, MVS to me is just the, like, he's the ideal Mahomes wide receiver.
Yeah.
Long and lanky, super quick, super downfield or deep threat guy. Like, that's a Mahomes type wide receiver.
And for those of you who say MVS can't catch the football, that's an old narrative. Cut it out. He had 0 drops last year. He had 0 drops. Cut the lazy narrative. That wraps out the Chiefs. All right, we got 2 teams here we really got to blaze through, but frankly, I don't think we don't need to spend a ton of time on this. Let's start with the blockbuster move. Well, not really blockbuster.
Well,
it didn't feel like a blockbuster because it was just picks,
which is kind of sad for the player that this is, but
yeah, it wasn't a Russell Wilson package. It was, I mean, Davante Adams got dealt for 2 first-round picks. A first and a second round pick, excuse me. It wasn't even 2 first-round picks. It was a first and a second. Yikes. Fair to say, Davante Adams is still an elite fantasy option, but because he now has Derek Carr as his quarterback, like, he's just not in that top 2 range anymore.
I mean, here's the thing. Does Davante Adams actually belong lower than top 5 for us? Because if the touchdowns aren't there for Derek Carr, what is going to be there?
Okay, so my counter argument to that. So this is where the argument of people saying, well, he never had an elite weapon like Adams, I think, comes into play, because I do think now all of a sudden you do have college teammates. Like, I think people are putting too much weight into these narratives. That's my frustration. It's
Mhm.
not that these narratives exist. It's that people are like, this is the reason why. And I'm like, it's not the reason why, though. It is about that much of a reason why you're trying to make your argument. But like, here's what I'll say. Davante Adams is more likely to finish outside of the top 5 wide receivers, I think, than inside of the top 5 wide receivers.
Yes.
Sure. I'll leave it at that. Except even though I think it's really like a 55% chance in and a 45 or a 45% chance in and a 55% chance out. Like it's nearly 50-50. But like I think 5 is the perfect, like, if he finishes outside, I'm not surprised. If he finishes inside, I'm also not going to be surprised. The reality is Derek Carr has thrown 40 less touchdowns than Aaron Rodgers over the past 5 years. Okay, that's the stat we really need to talk about here.
Yep.
That's the stat we really need to talk about. Derek Carr just doesn't throw the same amount of touchdowns as Aaron Rodgers does. Will Derek Carr's touchdowns go up? I would say yes. Does it go up enough to keep Davante Adams in the top 3? I think no.
Oh, this should have been my hot take, but I guess it doesn't really have to do with finishes at all. I feel like Darren Waller has more touchdown upside than Davante Adams this year.
That's a little too hot for me. I think they have close.
I'm sitting on it now, and I'm like, my seat's burning a little bit here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm like, I think that's a little too hot.
I mean,
I won't say that too loud, but like, I think it's a little too hot.
I mean, I just trust Darren Waller, Derek Carr connection a little more than Davante and Derek Carr. I don't deny the talent, but like we've seen Darren Waller thrive with Derek Carr before.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big reason why this next player now, I am just 100% out on this year.
Out.
I don't understand why people are still interested in drafting Hunter Renfrow this year. Like, you look at his previous years, 77 targets, 79 targets, I believe it was his second year. You want to know why he didn't see? Because he wasn't the number 1 pass catching option on that team. Why did he jump up to 128 targets last year?
Well, because Darren Waller went out.
He was literally the only option for Derek Carr on his team. Why do you think Hunter Renfrow had 9 touchdowns last year?
There was no Darren Waller.
And no Davante Adams, who will see almost all of those touchdowns this year now, right? Like, Hunter Renfrow, I think, will be fortunate to see 110 targets this year.
Lucky.
You would say lucky. I was going to say lucky. I lean towards fortunate. Because I think Renfrow probably could see right. I haven't projected at 111, but I think I have to bring that number down. I just don't see. I don't like 128 targets, and you were the only option. Henry Ruggs went ahead and just decided to be a bad human being.
True.
Darren Washington, that's very harsh, but you get my point. Darren Waller was injured. Can you name who the wide receiver 2 was on that team last year?
It was Zay Jones.
Well, I was going to say Brian Edwards. So that goes to show how confident we were in who the wide receiver 2 was.
Actually, it was Foster Moreau. Actually,
there it is. Foster Moreau. He moved, slotted in wide receiver a few weeks. Point being, I can't buy into Hunter Renfrow, man. For where he's being drafted, the guys around him, when you're looking at the Allen Lazards, you're looking at the Christian Kirks, you're looking at the Brandon Ayuk's, you're looking at guys who have so much more freaking upside than Hunter Renfrow does this year. At where he's going in the draft, I am not looking for safety. I am not looking for the guy who's going to see 6 targets a game and will have 5 receptions for 47 yards. Like, I am not interested in that at that point. Give me Brandon Ayuk, who has a chance to see 7 targets a game and 85 yards in each game. Give me that upside all 7 days of the week and twice on Sunday over Hunter Renfrow.
I want to do some research and see like the last time we've seen 3 skill player, or I shouldn't say skill players, but like 3 pass catchers from a single team finish like it gets complicated because like
in terms
Renfro's
of like
going,
total fantasy points.
well, yeah, I mean like Renfro's going as a wide receiver or like late 30s right now, but like
lower than or higher than where we have him. I have him at 39. You have him at 41. I believe he's going right around 36, 37.
Yeah. But like Waller's a top 5 tight end, Adams is a top 5 wide receiver, but like let's say Adams finishes wide receiver 8 and Waller finishes tight end 6. I think the point is there's just no room for him to finish.
There's not
right where he's being drafted at or above.
There's no there is no upside to Hunter Renfrow. There is no upside to Hunter Renfrow unless something happens to Devontae Adams. There's just not. There's just not. I have such little interest in Hunter Renfrow this year. I get he was a nice story last year, and I get you want to try and make him the sneaky, like, does he actually have value guy? But when you catch 9 touchdowns as the wide receiver 1 in that Raiders offense, and then you get a superstar to replace you, sorry, you're irrelevant now. Whoa, you just got bug eyes.
Something non-fantasy football related. Sorry.
All right, you're good. I'm like, I was waiting for a notification to roll through on my phone, and I didn't see anything. So we're going to keep rolling.
Sorry.
All right, we still got a whole team to get through here yet. Darren Waller, he's a top 5 tight end, correct? We both have him at tight end 4. I think I'm willing to call him a lock for a top 5 tight end. Top 6 for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Derek Carr, not top 12.
Nope.
For you, not top 15. Nope. I have him at 15. You have him at 16. So you have no interest in, even if you punt on quarterback, taking a shot on Derek Carr this year, because it always feels like there's the one quarterback every year where you're like, ooh, I mean, he could. I feel like I'm taking a gamble by waiting on him, like the Jalen Hurts last year, right? Where it's like, he could be good, maybe. But like Derek Carr's not that guy, correct?
No. I mean, give me Trevor Lawrence at his ADP compared to Derek Carr.
Oh, okay, at his ADP. Okay, all right. I had to factor in the at his ADP there. I'm like,
had to clarify, because if I just straight up say, give me Trevor Lawrence over Derek Carr, everyone would be like, you're crazy. No, ADPs.
Yes, 100% agree. The guy you want Kirk Cousins over Derek Carr, correct?
Yes,
I do as well. You want Trey Lance over Derek Carr?
Oh, Trey Lance.
Yeah, I want Trey Lance over Derek Carr as well. Like,
shout out Alex Caruso.
Yeah, dude. Alex was so much fun to have on, man. We got to get him back on soon. At any rate, Derek Carr is not the guy you think he is. We would rather have Kirk and Trey Lance over him. Those are the 2 quarterbacks I would much rather wait on than Derek Carr this year. And Josh Jacobs. What is this going to be a committee backfield?
Yes.
How much of a committee? Because you have Jacobs at 24. So that indicates like Jacobs has some standalone value, but like not enough to where obviously, he's been finishing top 12 the past 2 seasons, right? Like,
well, I just think anywhere below 25 is too far of a drop from where he has been in the past. I'm like, yeah. I don't remember the last running back that has had a drastic drop from borderline running back 1 to not even running back 2 territory. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like part of me putting him at 24 is really just like, he's still going to be relevant, but like, I mean, he's a goal line running back at this point. Like, that's really all there is to him.
The thing about Josh Jacobs that's kept him so valuable the past 2 years is his work in the passing game. I just don't see that continuing this year. With 64 targets last year, I'm sorry, Josh Jacobs is not going to see north of 50 targets this year. I think I haven't projected for 50 targets. I should be careful what I say. I think I haven't projected right at 50. But the matter of fact is that when you bring in Devontae Adams, you get a Darren Waller healthy, you still have Hunter Renfrow, you have pass-catching running back Kenyon Drake. They brought in Brandon Bolden, who was a pass-catching back in New England. I don't see the path to Josh Jacobs needing to see north of 50 targets this year. I just don't think Mike McDaniel will force that.
Oh, I mean, my favorite stat for Josh Jacobs, his ADOT last year, his average depth of target was literally in the negatives. which means he got screens or checkdowns.
Yeah, they created nothing for him.
And I was going to say, like, Gruden has his coach for half the year. I'm willing to bet it was more check down than it was screen.
Yes, I would agree.
And when you have a coaching change, that is the one thing for running backs that is immediately put into question.
Yep.
In terms of how it translates to next year. If your receiving work is coming from checkdowns and you have a new coach, it ain't going to be the same.
No, it's just not. I like Josh Jacobs' targets will not keep going up by 17 each season, right? Like we need to chill a little bit on that aspect.
But his ADP is so good though, Lucas. Don't you understand? His ADP is just amazing.
Well, yeah, and they added Davante Adams, so that'll open things up more for Josh Jacobs, and they'll be in scoring position more often. Sure, I think I have Josh Jacobs statted out at 10 touchdowns this year. But also, it's just the stupid efficiency stat that I hate talking about because we assume how an offense is going to run before we actually see it. And I guess that it is a valid vice versa argument, but I'm sorry, just because you add Davante Adams, does that not also mean they're going to be more inclined to pass the football? And it doesn't just automatically open up the tab, right? Like there are so many counter arguments here where it's like, you know what? Why are we trying to assume so much? Why don't we look at what we do know and base our projections on that? And I do know Josh Jacobs won't see 65 targets again this season. Therefore, he is significantly lower than the top 15 in my rankings. Case in point. All right, let's blow through the Chargers because, frankly, I don't think we need to sit here and spend too much time on the Chargers. Justin Herbert's a top 3 quarterback for fantasy football. Is he not?
Yep.
All right, great. We can move on. I don't think there's any denying that. Keenan Allen. It's a top 10 wide receiver for all of us. You have him at 8. I have him at 10. We love Keenan Allen. He's Mr. Consistent. Odds he sees another 140 plus target season this year.
I mean, 100%.
I was gonna say, I think I'm at like 90 there, mostly because I think we could see like a changing of guards to the next guy we're going to talk about potentially. But again, if I'm a betting man, I would put the money on over 140 targets for Keenan Allen this year.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to remain an elite option. There's no two ways about it. I think the only thing you could say is like touchdowns. You would like to see a bit more touchdowns, but frankly, I think that's where this next guy has really stepped up and started to take over there. And that's why we're all in on Mike Will this year. Wide receiver 11. I didn't realize you had him as your wide receiver 11. He's wide receiver for me, wide receiver 11 for you. Can we quit using inconsistency as a metric for judging players' values? Because this is the argument I want to use for Mike Will. Mike Will is giving you what was his fantasy points per game last year? Can you pull that up for me?
15.4.
15.4. His fantasy points per game last year. We'll use that as the median because that is your average across the entire season. Okay. You look at what he can give you. If he gives you, let's say his average floor, right? His outlier floor is like 4, but that's every fantasy football wide receiver. Okay.
Tyreek Hill had that.
Bingo. His average floor is 7. His ceiling is 28. The difference between, let's do some math, the difference between 15 to 7 is 8 points. You following still, boys and girls? The difference between 15 to 28 is 13. I will gladly sacrifice 7 points, 8 points each week on the chance that Mike will either hit his average or his absolute maximum or somewhere in between there. I think it is far more likely he booms every single week than he does bust every single week.
Here's a stat that I found on Mike Williams. 6 of his 16 games last year, he finished with over 20 fantasy points. 37% of the time, he was over 20 points. That percentage alone is far bigger and greater than majority of the other receivers that you see in the league. And like Cooper Kupp is an exception. Davante Adams is an exception. They're the outliers. But like when you get outside of the top 5 wide receivers and you're like, I want someone that can really kind of boom week to week, Mike Williams is your guy.
Mike Williams is your guy. He's going as the wide receiver 19 after finishing as the wide receiver 10 in half PPR formats, people.
Feed that all day.
If you don't want a top 12 wide receiver, we will gladly take him for you. Like, when you say you don't, Mike Williams, too inconsistent for me. You don't want a top 12 wide receiver. That's what you just told me. That's what you just told me. I can't believe it. It makes me sick that people don't want Mike Williams this year. It makes just sick. And it, people in my leagues I play in leagues with, go ahead. You can pass on Mike Williams. I'll take him. But everybody else who passing on Mike Williams, you're missing a chance on winning your league. Austin Eckler, top 3 fantasy running back still. I think it's like,
I'd say top 5. Top 3 is like if everything goes right for Eckler, which I feel like it did last year, but top 5 for sure.
I would agree. I think top 5. He shouldn't be going outside of the top 5 running backs. That I agree with. We don't need to say more on Austin Eckler. PPR extraordinaire. I would argue one of the safer options because of his pass catching ability.
Mm-hmm.
Any final thoughts you have before we wrap up the podcast here? I would go through difficult rankings, easy rankings, whole 9 yards, but like we got to wrap this thing out. We're running overtime here.
Yeah. No, not really. I mean, please just look up stats and take stats as facts because that's just what it is. That's just what it is.
We're not just a group of 20-something-year-olds here just spewing crap out of our butts, okay? Right? Like, we put our time and research into this. We wouldn't just say things. Here, for instance, on TikTok, I made a post recently. 3 players that will absolutely outperform their ADP this year. Ezekiel Elliott was on the list. I said that he was top 10 in carries, rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, carries inside of the 5, routes, run, targets, receptions amongst running backs last year, all while finishing as the running back 6 in half PPR formats.
And it was a
Googleable thing.
Season.
It was a bad season, right? It was a Googleable thing. Someone in the comments says, Zeke sure as hell wasn't the running back 6 last year. I had him on my team in that exact same scoring format. It is a Googleable fact. It is a Googleable fact. We are not just throwing things out here without researching them first. So yes.
Oh, the comments have stooped down to a level I did not think was possible.
I hate calling out commenters, but there's just some that is just like
deserved.
Yeah. Well, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. Make sure to follow us on the socials. FF Fellas on Twitter, the FF Fellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas, Facebook, YouTube, and the good old TikTok. We're still pumping out quality content for you there every single day. Yeah, come play with us on Underdog, baby. Come play with us on Underdog. You can check out that link down in the description here on YouTube. It is also in the description of this podcast as well. We are hosting Underdog leagues every single day that you can come play in. Use the promo code Fellas when signing up. They'll match your first deposit up to $100. With that, just 3 Stooges being dudes, the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. Thanks for tuning in this week, y'all. Deuces.